Hello, today we're going to continue with the lesson 3 of the BaZi education. I'm learning it with you, and today we're going to talk about the 10 different gods. I am on my screen here, and I have listed out the 10 different gods. Let's go over some relationships. Gods just represent the relationship with regards to the day master. Let's call it day master A. Now, God is to just annotate the eight's relationship in the form of another element. So the gods themselves are another element, but they are only to express the relationships. You might notice the relationship among the relationships, aka the relationships among gods, they're identical. Now, based on the day master, some relationships are more prominent, and any god can be bad and any god can be good. Okay? The nth god, so these are the roles of the gods. The nth god controls the n+2 god. The 10 gods are as following, and there are shortcuts to remember them being combined. So, 比肩 means friends, 劫财 means rob health. They are on the same level, meaning friend. One is the same polarity, the other one is an opposite polarity. The combination, sometimes they refer to the same level because they both mean friend. One is just the same polarity. The other one is opposite polarity. We call them 比劫, which stands for 比肩 and 劫财. It takes the first word. So that's the friend god. The second god is the output god. And that means 食神 eating god, 商官 herding officer, and they are abbreviated together the whole level as 食山, which is the 食神, the first letter, and 商官, the first letter of the second word. That's the output god. That's what you produce. The friend god is your peer. We will go down and we'll talk about what they mean in just a second. Let's go through all the 10 gods. The third god is the wealth gods. There are 2 gods. One is 偏财, which is indirect health. And then direct health is 正财. 正财 is the opposite polarity. 偏财 is the same polarity. Why is that when it's same, it's indirect wealth? Because yin and yang, when they combine, they make for a good couple. So if it's the opposite polarity, that's why it's called 正财. I hope that makes sense. Together, we call them 财星. Now, 偏财, this is the indirect health. Its abbreviation is this type. And then simplified type. And then the direct wealth, which is the opposite polarity, is this type. The 正财. Next combination is authority. That consists of 七杀, 7 killings, one of the most evil and powerful gods. 正官, which is a direct officer. And combined, they are called 官煞, which is taking the second letter and then the second letter of each. 官煞. Or sometimes they are called 官星. The last gods are resource gods. They are indirect resource, 偏印, and direct resource, 正印. Again, all the direct words you can see here are opposite polarity. That's because yin and yang are the official, whereas the 偏 is same polarity because yang and yang and yin and yin, technically they don't combine, so they are indirect. This is called 印星. They are collectively known as 印星. So we have 比劫, 食山, 财星, 官煞, 印星. The same polarity are 比肩, 食神, 偏财, 七煞, 偏印. And the opposite polarities are 劫财, 伤官, 正财, 正官, 正印. You see, the opposite polarity is all very 正. Now, here is a chart to visualize the interaction among the gods. This is a representation of this sentence. Nth god controls the n+2 god. So, 比肩, they or controls wealth. Wealth controls resource. Resource controls output. Output controls authority. And authority controls friend. In Chinese, is 比劫, 比肩 controls 财星. 财星 controls 印星. 印星 controls 时商 and 时商 controls authority and authority controls 比肩. Okay, so they all control each other. The generation part is easy. That's friend produces the output, output produces the wealth, wealth produces the authority, authority produces the resource, resource produces the friend. Now, what I mentioned here is relationship among gods are identical. So regardless what is your day master, okay, you fix the day master, you can figure out its 比肩, its output, its wealth, and so on. And then those are represented by other gods, right? The gods are just to annotate another god. But the relationship among the relationships will be identical throughout, meaning output, anyone's output will always control its authority, and anyone's authority will always control its friend, etc., etc. One thing to make note here, when you say A controls B, technically, even though A controls B, sure, B also 好于 A. Similarly, if A generates B, then B 谢于 A, meaning that B is also spending A's resource for A to birth B. I hope that makes sense. This is from an online resource where you take the day master, you figure out the resource star, friend star, output star, wealth star, and authority star. And because there is the two polarities, you can see the opposite polarity is for the friend star is 劫财, rob wealth, and the same polarity is 比肩. And then with the 时商, the opposite polarity is 山官, the same polarity is 食神. And here, the resource here, this is the wealth star. The same polarity is 偏财, opposite polarity is 正财. Authority star, the opposite polarity is 正官, and the same polarity is 七煞. And finally, resource star. The opposite polarity is 正印, and the same polarity is 消神. This is 消神, or another way of calling it is called 偏印. They mean the same thing. So this chart, this diagram, and this chart, they are exactly the same. They just, one is in the table, the other one is in the chart. I highly recommend that you make a spreadsheet. On the front, these are the words, and on the back, these are the same polarity and the opposite polarity, along with the shorthand for the combination, along with what do these people produce and what do these people control, and what produces them and what controls them. So for example, by definition, if you look at this yin, which is the resource, it is being controlled by wealth. And wealth, the adage goes 财神财星破印, 财星破印, meaning that sometimes if you have too much wealth, you can cause health problems, and resource sometimes represents your health. So if you have too much wealth, then you have to spend that money to go somewhere, and that is used to control your medical bills. So for those BaZi, it means that you are not meant to be wealthy, or that person is not meant to be wealthy, which kind of sucks. But then if wealth controls resource, that's in order for that not to be true, then someone needs to keep wealth in check, and that is friends. So 比肩 controls wealth so that wealth doesn't become too domineering to control the resource, which will end up in medical bills. I know that is a circular reasoning, but that's exactly what BaZi is. 克者有克, meaning the controller needs to have someone controlling it. So if A controls B, then if there's nothing to control A, then A will just go off and keep controlling B. And which, if B is important to you, then you kind of screw. So that's what that means. So as mentioned before, not every god is good. So there's a correlation between stability and low ceiling. And there's also a correlation between evil and high ceiling. Higher the evil, when conquered, higher the reward. In this table, 比肩, let's go through each one of them. There are 10 of them, so we'll take a bit. So 比肩, there is a shortcut for that just called 比. Overall, it's a neutral, okay? It's a positive to neutral term. Let me call it neutral term. It's more of a neutral term, actually. But too much of it leads to low ceiling, okay? You don't want too much of it. Now, I break it down into 4 columns. If it's in excess and there are pros when you have a lot of it, then you have strong energy. Not the person has a strong G, but you have a lot. This day master has quite a bit of allies to use up their resource. And the way you think of BaZi is the day master is like the king, and all these other 7 stars are used to fight for the king, and there's a relationship among them. If no one fights well and it comes to the king, then king kind of dies. So you want to keep everyone in check and keep everyone in balance. So if you have too much 比肩, there are always pros, even if you have a lot of it. The pro is you have strong energy. The con is that you will have competition among friends and family, or that you have to work with their body. Sometimes it also means time, work with their time. Now in Chinese here, the pros, we can call them 为病用喜神时. So 病用药, those are the positive words. The cons will be 为忌凶神. So these are the negative words. Sometimes 比肩 could be in deficit in your 八字, and that's also, there are pros and cons even if they are in deficit. So that's why I divided into 4 columns here. When it's in deficit, most wealthy people's 八字 is actually relatively weak. Because 比肩 is neutral, and so there's not much of a high ceiling to it. So if you have too much of it, then it kind of controls the ceiling. So that's why a deficit, the pro is the super wealthy, is relatively doesn't spend their precious 八字, 7 out of the 8 characters, in something that is relatively low ceiling. The deficit in terms of the cons is that you could be super weak, and when you're super weak, you could face serious trouble. That's the 比肩. Let's talk about 劫财. 劫财is a slightly negative term, but having some can give very high upside. When it's in excess, the pros are you can be super rich. When it's in excess, the cons are you can also be super poor and you have an unstable life, and you usually lead to gambling or addictive behavior. The deficit, the pros of being deficient at it is you will have a stable life, and the cons of being deficient at it is you will not have high upside, which that means more stable life. When you say deficit and excess, that's all relative. Usually when you 2 or more is excess, and deficit is 1 or none, or 1 that's not very strong. Sometimes none, it actually out of this chart. Sometimes none could be deficient, sometimes none could be actually very, very good. Let's talk about 食神. 食神 usually is a positive thing. So by having too many of them means you are pleasure seeking. So the pros of 食神 is you are productive. They are usually tend to be innovators. And then the other pro of 食神 is that it's easy to make money, a lot easier than 伤官. When it's in excess, the cons are they are pleasure seeking. They like to eat. So a lot of the eating disorders come from eating. They tend to be a little bit overweight, and it drains the day master. The pros of being deficient is one tend to be more disciplined, but they're not really in the business creating part, but more in the directing and the management side. So not as creative, okay, and also not as expressive. Very good. The cons of being deficient is they are not so much of an innovator of a product. So that is 食神, but overall it's a positive term. And let's talk about 伤官. So 伤官 is slightly negative, but having some is helpful to achieve great things. The pros of 伤官 in excess are they're creative, they're extremely innovative. So Microsoft previous CEO, Bill Gates, is actually in their earlier chart, in the 年柱, the year column, they have 1 伤官, which means they tend to be super great engineers. The cons of being in excess is that they are more tiring in making money than the eating god. And most importantly, they are very rebellious and having an attitude. The pros of being deficient are that they are easygoing and they are rule-abiding. The cons of being deficient is that if eating god is also not present, so the 食神 is also not present, then they are not so much an innovator. Here, you have 偏财. 偏财 is with a small character Chinese type. Overall, it means fast wealth, volatile. The pros of being in excess are you have investment talent and you have business intuition. The cons of being in excess are you will lead to spectacular losses and unstable fortune. The pros of being deficient, you will have consistent growth. And the cons of being deficient at it is you might be too risk averse and you will have boring finances. 正财 with the direct 财, and direct 财 means it's opposite polarity. Overall, it's a stable wealth, it's hard work and structure, but it has low upside, but lower upside than 偏财. That's not exactly true, but in general, because 偏财 is the generational wealth and coming from business ideas. But if you have 正财, it doesn't mean that you don't have generational wealth. It's just that it's earned through the right channels. So the pros of being in excess are you are diligent and you are good with money and can still build an empire. Okay, you can. The cons of being in excess are you are overly rigid, you are materialistic, and you are uncreative. Now, I want to mention that a lot of these gods, even if they are good or bad, you can see a spectrum of both. So they can still be in your use, but you will see hints of them, just so you know. So think of it not as a binary, but more as a spectrum. The pros of being deficient are you enjoy freedom, they enjoy being flexible, and they are relatively risk tolerant. And the cons of being deficient is they have poor money discipline and lacks stability. Next one, we have 4 more. 七杀. 七杀 is the most dangerous god if uncontrolled, but it's also very powerful if transformed. That goes back to this part where higher the evil, when conquered, higher the reward. There's a correlation between evil and high ceiling, and a correlation between stability and low ceiling. So 七杀, the pros of being in excess are they are competitive, they are courageous, and they have strong leadership under pressure. The cons of being in excess are they are aggressive, they are reckless, and they tend to lead to burnout because there's too much things controlling them. The pros of being deficient are they're calm, they're stable, they have a stable temperament, and they are less stressed. The cons of being deficient are they lack drive and assertiveness, and they are too passive. That is 七杀. 正官, overall, it means structure, it means discipline, and it also means morality and reputation, especially reputation. So if you can control it when there are pros, whether in excess or deficient, these are the pros of being in excess. They have a sense of duty, they are reliable, and most importantly, they are respected. The cons of being in excess, which means they are unchecked, is they are overly conservative, they are usually very bureaucratic, and they have a suppressed creativity, which is terrible. The pros of being deficient are they are free thinkers and flexible and entrepreneurial. The cons of being deficient are they lack a sense of direction, and they have disrespect for rules and unstable career. Now, let me scroll up and point out one very interesting Chinese word. The reason that herding officer, which is the 十三撇, the 商官, it's called 商官, which is herding the officer, the authority. And that's because output controls officer. You can see here, herding officer, this is direct officer. Output, nth god controls the n plus 2 god. Output controls authority. Output controls authority. And that's why it's called 商官. There's a reason this thing is called 商官. Now, there's a phrase called 商官见官货物百端. Meaning that when the 商官 meets the 正官, lots of bad things will happen. Because the 商官is the one that is hella rebellious. And then when they meet the 正官, which is also slightly negative, and all the excess, all the cons show up. All right, last 2. 消神 is always means it's negative. Okay, it's negative. It's positive sometimes, but mostly negative. 曹操 is a 枭雄. So 枭 is someone that is historically it's a super bad term. It just means they eat their parents, all that. So it means conventional wisdom, very extreme. But which I will explain, all characters, all gods are not always negative. They have their pros. So the pros of being X's is they're intuitive, they're insightful, they're strategic, and they're very good for research. In fact, some of the smartest people are 小印. The cons of being in X's are they are overthinkers, they are paranoia, they tend to be isolated, they are arrogant. Very similar to 伤官, actually. They are a little bit rebellious, bad attitude, arrogant, and they have lots of emotional ups and downs. The pros of being deficient are they're practical, they're wise, they're grounded, and they're not lost in theory. The cons of being deficient are they lack imagination, they have poor adaptability. And then 正印. 正印 usually is a positive, mostly positive. Okay, mostly positive. But if you have too much of it, like everything, it can be negative. It means support, knowledge, protection, and purpose. Purpose could actually mean your career. It could actually mean your career. Some people say 七杀 and 正官 mean career, but 正印 can also mean career. Lots of things mean your career. The pros of being in excess in 正印 is you're wise, you are nurturing, and you are balanced. The con is they are overly protective and they are overly idealistic. Even if you have done much of it, the pros of being slightly deficient, but it's a useful god even if you are deficient, are that you are independent, you are pragmatic, and you are results driven. The cons are you are insecure, you are mentally detached. All right, I will end this call with a classic example. What makes BaZi hard is that you have to think 3 levels deep. So this is my own framework. This is a framework that I apply for most of the BaZi that I read now. And the framework is that there are 3 levels of 克. 克 means control. Okay, there are 3 levels of control. Think of BaZi as having an insurance policy. So let's say the Daymaster is 人, and let's say the 食神 is overabundant, and the overabundance is the issue, is the 病. Okay, so 病. 病 is the illness. So if you have a 病, you need a 治. So 食神, so 甲木为食神. So let's say my Daymaster is 人, so 甲木 is my 食神. That's because 食神 is the thing that 人水 produces. So from the 10 heavenly steps, water produces wood, and wood is my 食神 because it is the thing that I produce right here. So if I'm 人, then my output is either 伤官 or 食神, and this is the case. Let's say it's 食神. I hope that makes sense. So this is the framework. 克者有克，方为贵. That means only if the controller is being controlled, then it's good. So let's say I have 食神, which is overabundant. So that is, I have all the pros of 食神 right here. But because it is now calm, it's pleasure seeking, likes to eat, it drains the Daymaster. So these are all the problems. Even though it has problems, I'm pretty sure that whatever that 食神 also leads to some pros. Because again, this is a spectrum, not a binary. However, we need to control the 食神. That's the problem. So what controls 食神? Let's take a look. 食神 is right here, output. So 正印 controls it. But let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that you only have resource and then you have a lot of 食神 and you have a few 正印 in your thing. So you have 3 and you have 2 食神, 1个正印, 2 食神, 1 resource. What will happen? When you run into the 大运流年, which we'll discuss in the future. So when you run into these years, you are going to have something that attacks the resource, which when the wealth comes up, it will attack the resource. But if you depend on resources' ability to control output, the rise or the appearance of wealth in your life will take away resource, which takes away the thing that can keep output in check. So then you need the 3rd level of control, which is that what is the thing that will control this imaginary wealth that might arise in my later years? And that is 比肩. I hope that makes sense. There are 3 levels of control. So let me go over that again. Who controls 食神? 正印, which is the sin in my case. Okay, again, the guy is represented by another element. The problem is that if that's all you have, when the thing that appears to be 克金, the control, the 正印, you are screwed. So you need a thing. You need a thing to control that too. Okay, so 呼克金. Okay, sure. That is 正财, which is the wealth. That's imaginary level 2, something that will happen. And then who controls 丁, which is the fire. In my case, the wealth for 人 is fire, because 人 and then the wealth of 人水 is fire. So who controls 丁? Well, it is 比肩 and 劫财, which is myself, 壬水 and 癸水. Now, I am 壬水, so I need another 壬水 or another 癸水 to have that built in. So the purpose of the 比肩 and the 劫财 is more like an insurance policy that attacks the thing that might attack me in my journey. So there's the 八字, there's the 大运, and there's the 流年, and you need kind of insurance policy that's built in. 八字, ultimately 八字格局, which is the level, okay, comes down to how fault tolerant or bug tolerant it is. So if you don't have 比肩, which you don't have this 八字 built-in level 3 ke, then if the thing that controls your controller appears, you don't have the counter controller. It's a little bit complex. So 3 levels, don't think 5 levels. That's too much. That's circular reasoning. But don't think 2 levels. Most people stop at 2 levels, and that's also wrong. So you want to have the first level, and you want to have the third level. That's what you want. By the way, that whole sentence, I am just organizing what I learned into what I understood to be kind of the modern day language. And there's actually a lot of phrase. The beauty is that in a lot of the episodes and videos from ancient Chinese literature is 信, 应贴身, 无路则凶. 应 is your resource. 贴身 is they are like close to you, so they are giving you energy. But 无路则凶. 路 are the earthly branches whose components, okay, whose components are always 比肩 or 劫财. So Lu is basically the manifestation of 比肩 and 劫财. That goes into the earthly branches we'll cover in a future episode. But basically Lu is kind of yourself. And Lu is an insurance policy. It works almost exactly the same way as 比肩 and 劫财. So if you don't have that insurance policy, aka level 3 built-in insurance, then the yin is gonna be bad. So that is a classic example, and I'm explaining it in my own language. I hope that makes quite a bit of sense. And this is the type of video that I will make for myself. If you want to learn BaZi, you have to make flashcards, put those onto your flashcards, memorize them, and think about these 3 levels of control. It's a lot of fun, lots of fun, and definitely listen to a lot of podcast episodes. Everyone explained them slightly differently. I explain them the way I like, and hopefully when I look back on these videos myself, I learn something from myself as well. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.